My name is Ava Carter, 28 years old. The moment my mother's voice sliced through the air, the entire boutique seemed to stop breathing. Don't waste her time showing her diamonds, she said coolly. She can't even afford the box they come in. The soft music froze mid-note. The sales clerk's smile faltered, and I felt every gaze flick toward us like spotlights. Sterling and Row was the kind of place where silence could hum with judgment, and my mother thrived in it. She adjusted her pearl necklace, the motion slow and deliberate, savoring the attention. I had learned long ago that her cruelty was never spontaneous. It was rehearsed. Every barb, every smile, perfectly timed, and somehow, even after years of practice shielding myself, the words still landed like glass in my chest. I forced a measured breath. Actually, I said, keeping my tone steady, I came for something specific. She laughed under her breath, a dry rasp. What, a catalog? The young clerk blinked, unsure whether to laugh or pity me. I turned to her instead. Ava Carter, I said evenly. I placed an order last month. It should have arrived this week. Before she could respond, a man in a sharp charcoal suit appeared from the back, someone used to being obeyed without raising his voice, the boutique manager. His gaze shifted from my mother to me, and recognition brightened his face. Miss Carter, he said warmly, we've been waiting for you. Your custom diamond line from Paris just arrived this morning. Please come with me. We've set up a private room for your inspection. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the air shifted. My mother's smile froze mid-curve like wet paint hardening. Excuse me, she managed, her voice thin. There must be some mistake. None, ma'am, the manager said kindly. Miss Carter is one of our private clients. Her designs are exclusive to the Laurent collection. The clerk's mouth opened slightly. Two customers nearby turned to stare, their curiosity bright as camera flashes. I met my mother's eyes. I didn't need to speak. The truth was already doing its work. For years, she'd mocked me for chasing fantasies. Told family friends I was wasting my life drawing silly sketches. Laughed when I sold art prints online. But now she stood surrounded by jewelry I had imagined, designed, and built into reality. I followed the manager into the private suite, my pulse a quiet drum beneath my ribs. The room shimmered in muted light. On the velvet table lay the pieces that had once lived only in my sketchbook. Curves like falling water, stones like captured stars, every one engraved with a small, hidden signature, AC. The manager's voice softened. Laurent was right. You're a prodigy. I couldn't speak. My hands trembled as I lifted a necklace, its light scattering across my skin. I thought of every midnight spent sketching under a single lamp, of bills paid late, of my father's voice telling me not to give up. Then I saw her reflection in the glass door. My mother stood in the doorway, pale and rigid. You were right, Mom, I said quietly. I can't afford to buy these. I turned the necklace slowly between my fingers. But I can design them. The silence that followed glowed sharper than every diamond in the room. Outside, her heels clicked against marble as she followed me toward the exit. Ava, she hissed, her tone stripped of charm. What was that stunt supposed to prove? The automatic doors slid open. A rush of Manhattan air cut through the tension. It wasn't a stunt, I said, stepping into the light. That's my career. She scoffed. Since when do you have a career? You expect me to believe those prices are because of you? Yes, I said simply. Every sketch, every sleepless night you called a waste of time. Her face tightened. Pride and disbelief wrestled behind her eyes. You should have told me. I laughed softly, bitterness threading through it. You wouldn't have listened. For years I had swallowed silence while she spun my life into gossip for sympathy. I remembered calling her after my first gallery commission, desperate for validation. She'd replied, "That's nice, but are you getting health insurance?" You never believed in me, I said now, not until it benefited you. Her expression cracked for a fraction of a second. Guilt flickered, and then she smoothed it away. I wanted you to be secure, to have stability. No, I said, stepping closer. You wanted me to live your version of stability. Marry rich, smile at parties, pretend happiness was success. The traffic light changed. A wash of green swept across her face, splitting it between envy and realization. You sound just like your father, she muttered, looking away, always blaming someone else. That name hit like a bruise reopening. Dad believed in me, I whispered. He supported my art until the day he died. You erased that part of him because it didn't fit your perfect picture. Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. The city's hum filled the silence between us. For years, I said, I thought if I became successful, you'd finally love me differently. But it won't change anything. I turned toward the curb, and that's okay. Her heels scraped against the pavement as she caught up. Ava, wait, don't walk away like this. I'm not walking away, I said, meeting her eyes beneath the streetlight. I'm walking forward. For the first time, she seemed small, just a woman stripped of her armor, standing in a city too bright for her denial. She called after me, voice trembling. Everyone was staring at me in there. You humiliated me. I paused, hand on my car door. Now you know what it feels like. The door shut with a soft finality. As I drove off, the skyline shimmered through tears. Not of sadness, but release. The weight I'd carried for years lifted piece by piece like glass swept clean. Still, a part of me ached, because no matter how many times I told myself I didn't care, some small, stubborn corner of my heart still waited for her to say one thing: I'm proud of you. The city lights blurred into streaks as I whispered to the night, maybe one day. Behind me, the jewelry store lights faded, but I knew something irreversible had begun. The balance had shifted, and neither of us would ever look at each other the same way again. Morning in Paris arrived like a promise sketched in pale gold across the Seine. I stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, the glass cool under my fingertips, and watched the city arrange itself into focus. Bridges like bracelets, rooftops stitched in slate, the Eiffel Tower lifting its iron lattice into a sky that felt newly washed. In the reflection, my face hovered between dawn and neon ghost, a woman I almost recognized. Calm, composed, absolutely not afraid. Inside the showroom behind me, my debut collection hummed with quiet electricity. Lumiere by Ava Carter, each piece nested in velvet, each stone cut to remember every sacrifice it took to make it shine. Coffee, Mia announced, sweeping in with 2 cups and a stack of updated RSVPs. Her steps were quick, her eyes quicker, the kind of assistant who could balance tenderness and urgency without dropping either. Press call at 9. Laurent wants you on the mezzanine for lighting tests at 9:30, and... She grimaced in that way that meant good news for the brand, complicated news for my heart. Late RSVPs again. You won't guess who. I didn't look away from the window. A critic? I said lightly. Closer to home, she said, offering me the card. I took it, read the name, and felt a single stitch tug at the seam I'd so carefully sewn shut. Linda Carter, arriving tonight, claimed to be my manager. My thumb pressed into the cardstock until it bent. She called the main office, Mia added, voice careful. Said she's flying in. Said the papers are calling you the next big thing and she should be involved. Mia's eyes softened. I can handle it if you want. I'll handle it, I said, keeping my tone even, watching a tourist boat cut a pale wake across the river. The years had taught me the difference between bracing and closing. Today, I would do neither. I would simply stand. Laurent swept into the room a moment later, all tailored navy and paternal ease, the rare sort of man whose success made him gentler, not hungrier. Ma créatrice, he said, smiling as if the morning belonged to us. C'est le grand jour. It is, I said, and some of my tension dissolved. He'd found me back when my designs were just graphite and stubbornness. Where my mother saw embarrassment, he saw raw form. He paced the glass cases, hands behind his back. Your lines are bolder since New York, he murmured. You're designing like a woman who knows she cannot be made small. He looked up at me, pleased. Keep that. I nodded. The showroom team began their choreography. Stylists adjusting velvet displays, photographers testing angles, publicists whispering names. Under the murmurs ran a thin wire of doubt, mine, not theirs, because applause, I'd learned, could be as heavy to hold as silence. I checked clasps, traced curves, lifted the collection's centerpiece, a waterfall of diamonds that caught the morning like liquid, and thought of the girl sketching at a kitchen table beneath a lamp that buzzed. For a moment, I wanted to call my mother and say, look, it turned into light. Then the memory of Sterling and Rowe rose fresh enough to sting. By evening, the gala hall had transformed into a cathedral of gleam. Chandeliers dripped like constellations, cameras flashed, and gowns moved like oil on water. The air glittered with perfume and money, and the kind of praise that always arrived with a trailing clause. Laurent's name floated through the room, syllables of reverence. Mine followed it, newer, brighter, questioned in whispers and posed as compliments. American, a woman in sapphire asked me as if it were a genre rather than a nationality. Your shapes have such appetite. Thank you, I said, the word neat as a pin. A donor with a smile that never reached his eyes lifted a flute of champagne. No pedigree, no house, and you cut like this, he said. Fascinating. Who taught you? Failure, I said, and watched the corners of his mouth twitch. Mia hovered within reach, intercepting small cruelties with the grace of a goalkeeper. Walk the mezzanine, she murmured like a prayer. Let them see you from above. I climbed the small stairway and stood at the railing. Below, Lumiere winked inside its glass sanctuaries. Beyond that, Paris held its breath. I could feel the moment approaching, the one every girl secretly rehearses in a mirror and tells herself she doesn't. An announcer's voice checked the mic. The band quieted. Lauren gave a subtle nod from across the room. Then the double doors at the far end opened, and a familiar silhouette stepped through, a split-second delay in the room's oxygen. My mother had always been good at entrances. Emerald silk draped her like a thesis on old money, and a diamond earring I recognized, my grandmother's, flashed at her jaw. She scanned the room with that practiced poise, a general surveying territory she considered already hers, and then she found me. For a breath she looked proud, the reflexive kind, the reflexive mask. Then she started toward the center of the hall as if she'd been expected all along. Mia moved toward her, ready to redirect, but I lifted a hand. It's okay. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone who had already survived this. My mother reached me near the base of the stairs, smile polished to a mirror shine. Ava, she said, low enough for just us. You look stunning. I took in the gown, the earrings, the way the muscles at her temple fluttered beneath the skin. You RSVP'd late, I said, and promoted yourself to manager. We can discuss titles later, she said, still smiling. The papers are calling you the next big thing in luxury design. I suppose I should start saying I always knew. Funny, I said, steady. You once said my designs would end up at flea markets. A flicker, quick as a shudder, crossed her eyes. She leaned closer, voice thinner. Tonight isn't the time for grudges. Everyone here knows we're family. Let's act like it. Act like it. The phrase skimmed across my nerves like ice. I remembered all the years we were supposed to act happy, act perfect, act silent. The band modulated into a softer key. The MC stepped to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, he called, voice crisp, please welcome the designer of this year's exclusive Lumiere collection, Ava Carter. Applause sparked and then rolled forward in a bright wave. Cameras lifted, my name tilted the air. I walked toward the stage, feeling the floor steady under my feet, like the city itself was calibrating to my steps. From the microphone, the room looked like a sea of lighted windows. I didn't search for her face, but I felt it out there, some mixture of calculation and feeling she'd never learned to name. Thank you, I began, and the sound of my own voice surprised me with how unafraid it was. This collection is dedicated to anyone who was ever told they weren't enough. I paused long enough to taste the air. Sometimes the people closest to us can't see our light until it blinds them. A rippled hush passed through the crowd, caught breath, tilting chins, the kind of silence that arrives when something true lands in a room full of expensive lies. Somewhere in the fourth row, a woman lowered her camera and simply watched me. I thanked Lauren, thanked the team, spoke 3 sentences I'd never rehearsed about patience being a slow form of bravery. When the applause swelled again, it felt less like noise and more like tide. Offstage, the post-speech bright blur began, the interviews, the air kisses, the orchestration of praise. I smiled where it counted and didn't where it didn't. When it quieted enough to hear the music again, I saw her near the far edge of the ballroom, isolated not by distance, but by the way her expression had lost its map. For a long time, I had wanted this, to watch her finally see me without a script. The wish, granted, felt nothing like victory. It felt like a pressure in the throat. I crossed the marble floor. She turned before I arrived, as if pulled by a string older than both of us. Her voice was soft, almost careful. You were amazing up there. Thank you, I said, and let the words land between us without patting. She swallowed, gathered her poise, lost it. I shouldn't have said those things. At the store. Before that, I thought I was protecting you. For the first time, the sentence wore no costume. I folded my arms, not in defiance, but to hold the tremor still. No, Mom, you were protecting yourself from embarrassment, from a daughter who didn't fit your picture. Her eyes glistened, her breath caught. The room continued on without us, laughter, crystal tapping, the toneless kindness of wealth, while we stood inside a smaller, more dangerous sound, honesty. Your father believed in you, she said finally, the words pulled like thread from a knot. I couldn't see what he saw. After he passed, I needed everything to be controlled. I thought if I controlled you, I could control the grief. The admission didn't heal anything. It loosened something. I exhaled, then nodded once, the smallest agreement two women could share without touching. I'm not asking you to fix what's already happened, I said quietly. Just don't tear me down again. We let the sentence sit. Across the room, Mia lifted her chin toward me. A small check-in, the human kind that matters more than any review. I gave a slight wave. I'm okay, I would be. Later, I slid onto a balcony to breathe. Below, the river wrote silver cursive the city would never read aloud. Mia joined me, handing me a glass. To your first collection, she said. To the last time I let anyone make me feel small, I answered, and tasted the truth in it like citrus. Behind the glass doors, my mother lingered alone, one hand at her throat as if measuring the pulse of a life that had just shifted. I didn't go back in right away. I let the cold air work on my skin and the lights dot the water and the quiet return to my bones. Inside, the gala would end. Outside, Paris would keep glowing whether I watched or not. Tomorrow, I would fly home. Tonight, I allowed the weight of freedom to sit where pride used to live and understood why it felt heavier. It was real. The morning after the gala, Paris looked softer. Rain swept gently across the glass, and the streets shimmered as if the city itself were exhaling after too much light. I stood by the hotel window with a cup of coffee cooling in my hand, the Eiffel Tower veiled in mist, its top disappearing into the clouds like a secret half-kept. My phone buzzed with messages. Congratulations from critics, invitations from investors, interview requests. But I couldn't bring myself to answer any of them. All I could think about was the last image before I went to bed. My mother, standing near the ballroom exit, her face half turned toward the door, eyes distant. There had been no dramatic goodbye, no embrace, no closure wrapped in violins. Just the faint scent of her perfume left in the air, mingling with the laughter of strangers. I wondered if she went back to her hotel feeling proud or exposed, or maybe both. Maybe that was the closest thing to progress we could manage. Mia knocked lightly before letting herself in. The French press called you the Diamond Whisperer, she said, waving a newspaper. They're already asking about your next collection. I smiled faintly. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I haven't even caught my breath. She studied me for a moment, her usual brightness dimming. You haven't checked your messages? Not yet. There's one from her, Mia said softly. Sent around 2 a.m., just one line. I'm proud of you. I froze. The coffee in my hand went lukewarm. My throat tightened. Not from anger or relief, but something in between, the emotion that comes when an old wound is touched too gently to bleed, but too firmly to forget. Thank you, I murmured, though it wasn't to Mia. You should rest, she said, slipping out quietly. The rain thickened. I leaned my forehead against the window, eyes blurring, as I watched the city dissolve. My whole life I had chased that sentence, I'm proud of you, as if it were oxygen. And now that it had arrived, belated and weightless, I didn't know what to do with it. That evening, I flew home. The hum of the plane was steady, almost hypnotic. As the clouds thinned and the Atlantic unfurled below, I pulled out my sketchbook. The graphite lines came easily, shapes flowing one into another, rings, necklaces, fragments of light caught mid-motion. Somewhere around the fifth sketch, I realized I wasn't designing for approval anymore. I was designing because it made me feel alive. When the wheels touched down at JFK, I didn't call anyone. I just went home. My apartment was quiet, smelling faintly of lavender and turpentine from old paint. The city beyond the window glowed like a second chance. On the kitchen counter sat a small envelope, no return address, just my name written in careful cursive. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting a bill or a contract. Inside was a single card. For every diamond you create, Remember, you're the rarest one of all. Love, Mom. A single tear slipped before I could stop it. Maybe she meant it, maybe she didn't. But for the first time, it didn't matter. I had already learned the truth the hard way. Some people will never see your worth until the world does first. And even then, they might still look through you instead of at you. I placed the card gently in a drawer, not as a keepsake, but as a marker. A reminder that healing doesn't always come wrapped in an apology. Sometimes it comes in the quiet decision to move forward anyway. That night, I worked late in my studio. Sketches covered the walls like constellations, each one a tiny record of struggle turned into beauty. The lamplight glowed gold across my desk. I reached for one unfinished piece, a ring inspired by the ripple of water after a single drop falls. I'd been avoiding it for months, unable to decide how it should end. Now I knew. I added one final curve, closing the design into a perfect loop, simple yet strong. I signed the bottom corner with 3 small letters, AC. Leaning back, I whispered to the quiet room, "You did it, Ava. You did it without them." The words hung in the air like a benediction. For once, I believed them. I turned off the desk lamp and walked to the window. New York glittered below, cars threading through the night, streetlights pulsing like veins. In the reflection, I didn't see the daughter who'd begged for approval, or the girl who'd been humiliated in a jewelry store. I saw a designer, a survivor, a woman who had turned her pain into light. On the table beside me, one of my newest creations caught the moon. A ring shaped like a teardrop of light, its facets reflecting every lesson I'd paid for in heartbreak. I slipped it onto my finger, felt its weight, solid, grounding, and smiled. "This one's for me," I whispered. The world outside sparkled back as if agreeing, and for the first time in my life, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like freedom,